Picture this. Across the dusty streets of Kano in northern Nigeria, a young boy once sold candies to his classmates just to make pocket money. Fast forward decades later, that same boy will sit in boardrooms where the fate of billion-dollar industries is decided. Today, he is known as the man who feeds nations, builds cities, and fuels economies. His companies produce the cement that holds up skyscrapers, the sugar that sweetens millions of cups of tea, and soon, the fuel that powers Africa's engines. His name? Aliko Dangote. But here is the untold story. Dangote's rise was not just about smart business decisions, it's about timing, risks, government policies, controversies, and a relentless ambition to dominate every industry he touched. Some call him a visionary, others say he is a monopolist who crushed competition with the help of political favors. Yet, love him or hate him, one fact remains. Dangote rewrote Africa's business story. This is not just a tale of wealth, it is a saga of power, risk, and legacy. This is the untold story of Aliko Dangote, how he became Africa's richest man. Aliko Dangote was born on April 10, 1957, in Kano, northern Nigeria. At the time, Kano was one of West Africa's busiest trade centers, famous for textiles, leather, and agriculture. The air smelled of spices, and markets bustled with merchants from across the Sahara. Dangote was born into privilege. His great-grandfather, Alhassan Ntata, was once the richest man in West Africa, a powerful merchant in kola nuts and groundnuts. His family name alone opened doors. But here's what makes Dangote's story different. Instead of simply enjoying inherited wealth, he wanted to create his own path. As a boy, Aliko showed a sharp eye for business. In school, while other kids spent their money on sweets, he bought cartons of them and resold them to his classmates for a profit. It wasn't about survival, it was about instinct. Even then, Dangote thought like a businessman. Growing up in this environment, surrounded by merchants, traders, and businessmen, gave him both privilege and pressure. He knew he came from a family with wealth, but he was also wanting to prove himself, to show that he could stand on his own, not just on the shoulders of his ancestors. But his journey will not be without help. The first real turning point came from someone close, his maternal uncle, Sanusi Ntata. Aliko Dangote's education started in Kano, where he attended Sheikh Ali Kumasi Madrasa before moving on to Capital High School. But like many ambitious young Africans of the time, he wanted more than just local learning. He traveled to Cairo, Egypt, where he studied business at Al-Azhar University, one of the oldest and most prestigious universities in the world. Cairo exposed him to modern trade, finance, and the mindset of building big enterprises. It was here that Dangote sharpened his ambition not to simply be a trader, but to become an industrialist. But education alone wasn't enough. What he needed was capital, and that came from his uncle Sanusi Ntata, who saw potential in the young Aliko. In 1977, at the age of 20, Dangote was given a loan of 500,000 naira, about $3,000 at the time, but a fortune in Nigeria. Now, this wasn't just a gift, it was a test. His uncle wanted to see if Aliko could turn that money into something meaningful. Many young men would have squandered it on cars, luxury, parties, but Dangote had different plans. With that seed money, he left Kano and moved to Lagos, Nigeria's bustling commercial capital. Lagos in the late 1970s was chaotic, noisy, but full of opportunity. It was the heartbeat of Nigeria's economy, and Aliko Dangote was about to write his name into its history. To understand Dangote's rise, we must first understand Nigeria in the late 1970s and 1980s. Nigeria had just come out of a civil war and the economy was fueled by oil. The country was called the Giant of Africa, yet its markets were drowning in imported goods. Rice from Asia, sugar from Brazil, cement from Europe, billions of dollars left Nigeria every year. But with oil booms came oil busts. The Nigeria economy swung like a pendulum. One year, there was money everywhere. The next, scarcity hits hard. Inflation rose, corruption spread, and businesses suffered. For most Nigerians, this was chaos. But for Aliko Dangote, it was opportunity. Armed with his uncle's loan, he began trading rice, sugar, cement, and flour, the very items Nigeria depended on but couldn't produce enough of. He built warehouses in Lagos, hired trucks, and started moving goods across the country. Here is the key. Dangote wasn't just a trader, he was a master strategist. While others focused on small margins, he focused on volume. He would buy huge quantities of sugar or cement, sell them cheaper than competitors, and still walk away with big profits. By the mid-1980s, Dangote had carved out a reputation as a reliable supplier. If a governor needed cement for a road project or a company needed sugar in bulk, they called Dangote. But this is where the controversy enters the story. Many critics argue that Dangote's rise was not just about business brilliance. They say he benefited from government connections that gave him import licenses, contracts, and protection from competition. Was Dangote simply smart enough to seize opportunities others ignored, or was he helped by a system that favored him? That question still divides Nigeria today. By the late 1980s and early 1990s, Dangote's trading empire had exploded. His company, Dangote Group, was now one of the biggest suppliers of essential commodities in Nigeria. He controlled fleets of trucks, warehouses, and distribution networks. His sugar fed bakeries, his cement built houses, and his rice filled kitchens. But trading is a dangerous business. Profits depend on international prices, government policies, and unpredictable supply chains. One bad shipment could wipe out millions. Dangote began to see the flaw. Nigeria was too dependent on imports, he once said. Nigeria is one of the most promising markets in the world, but if we don't produce locally, we will always remain weak. This was the seed of his next big move, one that would transform him from a trade into a manufacturer. But before that, let's address another controversy. Some rivals accuse Dangote of using predatory pricing to crush competition. He would sell goods at a lower price than anyone else, even at little profit, just to drive out rivals out of market. Once they collapse, he raises the prices again. Whether this was ruthless or intelligent depends on how you see it, but one thing is clear. By the 1990s, Dangote was no longer just a trader. He was becoming a monopoly. And soon, he would find that one product that would make him not just a wealthy man, but the richest man in Africa. If you ask most Nigerians what product they associate with Dangote, The answer is simple: cement. But why cement? Because in Nigeria, building never stops. From homes to highways, schools to skyscrapers, cement is the backbone of the development. But for decades, Nigeria imported most of it. Ships loaded with cement lined up at Lagos ports, causing traffic jams so bad they became infamous as the cement armada. Dangote saw this dependency as both a weakness and an opportunity. In the 1990s, while other businessmen chased oil contracts or quick political deals, Dangote took a gamble. He invested in local cement production. It was a risky move. Factories cost billions, the government's economic policies were unstable, and Nigeria's infrastructure was unreliable. But Dangote had a vision. If we can produce cement in Nigeria for Nigeria, we will control the market. By 2003, Dangote Cement had begun operations. It was not smooth sailing. Machines broke down, logistics failed, and investors doubted him. But slowly, brick by brick, he built what would become the largest cement company in Africa. Today, Dangote Cement has factories in 10 African countries, producing over 48 million metric tons annually. In Nigeria alone, the company controls over 60% of the market. Critics call it a monopoly, supporters call it nation building. But here is the bigger story. Dangote Cement revolution reduced Nigeria's reliance on imports, created thousands of jobs, and saved billions in foreign exchange. At the same time, it made him a billionaire many times over. Cement was no longer just a product, it was the foundation of his empire. And with cement came power. Political leaders needed him, investors wanted him, and banks trusted him. Dangote had moved from being a trader at the port to a man whose factories reshaped skylines. But he wasn't done yet. While cement was his crown jewel, Dangote also dominated another essential commodity: sugar. In the 2000s, Nigeria consumed millions of tons of sugar every year for tea, bread, soft drinks, and confectionery. Once again, most of it was imported. Dangote saw the same pattern: dependency on imports, weak local production, and a massive local demand. So, he built Dangote Sugar Refinery, one of the largest in the world. At its peak, the refinery in Lagos produced 1.44 million metric tons annually, meeting 70% of Nigeria's needs. Just like cement, this gave Dangote enormous influence. Bakeries, food companies, beverage manufacturers all depended on his sugar. This raised another round of criticism. Some said Dangote had become too powerful, controlling essential goods that ordinary Nigerians couldn't live without. If sugar or cement prices went up, it wasn't just numbers. It meant school fees delayed, rent unpaid, and meals skipped. But Dangote insisted his mission was to make Nigeria self-sufficient. He argued that importing everything was killing the economy and that local production, even if expensive at first, would pay off in the long run. And in many ways, he was right. By the late 2000s, Dangote was no longer just a businessman. He was an industrialist, a symbol of Nigerian capitalism, and a national figure. But there was still one more leap left. The leap that would cement his status as Africa's richest man. In 2011, the global financial world turned its eyes to Nigeria. Forbes magazine released its annual billionaire rankings, and for the first time ever, a Nigerian businessman topped the African list. Aliko Dangote, net worth $13.8 billion. The news spread like wildfire. Across Nigeria, people celebrated him as a national hero. One of our own is now richer than all of South Africa's tycoons. richer than Egypt's business dynasties, richer than any African before him. But what made this moment powerful wasn't just the number, it was what Dangote represented. A man who started with bags of sugar and cement, now standing shoulder to shoulder with the world's richest. By 2013, his fortune had grown to over $25 billion, making him not just Africa's richest man, but one of the 25 richest people on earth. But Dangote did not stop there. His biggest, boldest gamble was yet to come: oil. Nigeria is Africa's largest oil producer, but here is the irony. For decades, the country's imported most of its fuel. Refineries were broken, corrupt officials made billions from imports, and ordinary Nigerians suffered from fuel scarcity. Dangote decided to change that. In 2016, he announced the construction of the Dangote refinery in Lagos, a mega project costing over $19 billion. This was no ordinary refinery. It was designed to process 650,000 barrels of crude oil per day, making it the largest in Africa and one of the biggest in the world. The risks were enormous. Cost ballooned, deadlines shifted, and skeptics laughed. Many said it will never be completed, but Dangote pushed forward, pouring his fortune into the project. By 2023, the refinery was finally inaugurated, with global leaders in attendance. If successful, it will not only end Nigeria's dependence on imported fuel, but could also transform West Africa's energy market. Some call it the project that will redefine Africa. Others see it as Dangote's greatest test. Beyond business, Dangote also built an image as a philanthropist. Through the Dangote Foundation, he donated millions for healthcare, education, and disaster relief across Africa. He funded the fight against Ebola in 2014. During COVID-19, he provided testing kits, equipment, and relief supplies worth billions of naira. He built hospitals, schools, and scholarships. For many, he became a symbol of African generosity, a billionaire who gave back. But philanthropy also reinforced his influence. When politicians needed support, when global leaders visited Nigeria, when NGOs needed funding, Dangote's name always came up. Yet, no empire is without shadows. Critics accuse Dangote of running a monopoly that hurts competition. Smaller businesses say they cannot survive because Dangote controls too much of the market: cement, sugar, flour, salt, and now oil. Some accuse him of benefiting from government protection, tax breaks, and favorable policies that ordinary businessmen could never access. Others argue that while Dangote is worth billions, millions of Nigerians still live in poverty, and his businesses don't always lower prices as much as people hoped. Still, despite this criticism, Dangote remains untouchable. His wealth, his network, and his vision keep him at the top. Today, Aliko Dangote is not just a businessman, he is a symbol of African ambition. To some, he represents what is possible, proof that an African can rise to the highest levels of global wealth without being born into a Western empire. To others, he represents the flaws of African capitalism, a system where one man can control entire industries while millions suffers. But one thing is certain, Dangote's story is far from over. His refinery could make or break his empire. His wealth could grow even larger or face new challenges. And as history unfolds, one question will remain. Is Aliko Dangote the man who would finally industrialize Africa, or the man who simply built an empire for himself? As of today, Aliko Dangote remains Africa's richest man. His businesses feed millions, his cement builds cities, and his refinery could fuel an entire continent. But what comes next? The Dangote refinery is more than just a business project. It is his ultimate gamble. The one that could either cement his place as Africa's industrial savior or expose the limits of his empire. If successful, the refinery could end Nigeria's dependence on imported fuel, save billions in foreign exchange, create thousands of jobs, position Nigeria as a fuel exporter to West Africa. But if it fails, the cost, $19 billion, is so massive that even Africa's richest man would feel the hit. This project is Dangote's legacy in motion. It is what he will be remembered for 50 years from now. At 68 years old, Dangote is still very active, but succession is the question no one ignores. Who will run the empire when he is gone? His daughter Fatima Dangote is already deeply involved in the cement and floor businesses. Other family members and trusted executives are being groomed as well. But can anyone fill his shoes? Dangote is not just a businessman, he is a force of will, and history shows us that many empires crumble when the founder leaves. For millions of Africans, Dangote is more than just a billionaire. He is a proof that Africa can produce global business icons. He shows that the continent is not just a land of poverty and aid, but a place where industrial giants can emerge. When young entrepreneurs across Africa look for inspiration, they see Dangote, a man who started small, a man who reinvested profits instead of wasting them, a man who believed Africa should stop importing and start producing. But Dangote's life also reveals a painful truth. In a country as rich in resources as Nigeria, millions remain poor while one man towers over the economy. Some see him as a hero of industrialization, others see him as a symbol of inequality. This contradiction will forever shape his legacy. As we close this story, let's ask, what does Dangote's journey teach us? Take risk others avoid. Patience is power. Solve essential problems. Legacy is greater than money. Think long term. Reinvest. So, who is Aliko Dangote? A sweet-selling boy from Kano, a cement king, a refinery dreamer, a billionaire, a symbol of Africa's possibility. He showed the world that Africa is not just a consumer, Africa is a creator. A man who dared to believe that Africa could rise, not tomorrow, but today. And that is the untold story of Aliko Dangote, Africa's richest man.